Hello, everyone. Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities, and the owner of Claremont Mental Health. I'm back today with Michelle Minette. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Mandy.
Tell us about your practice.
I am a certified holistic life coach that specializes in helping people heal from narcissistic abuse. I see people online and in person in my practice in Hamilton, Ohio, called F All That Wellness Coaching.
And you have a support group also that people can attend in person and online. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Every other Thursday evening at 7:30. SNAG, Surviving Narcissistic Abuse Group meets. Yes, and people join on Zoom or in person.
So if you're looking for a support group, Michelle has one up and going. She's ready for you, and her contact information will be in the notes to this episode. Today we're going to talk about healthy conflict and harm repair contracts. Now, Michelle has a concept that she's going to share with us today that has to do with how to have healthy conflict, but more specifically, what do we do after harm has taken place in a relationship? Can you describe for us a little bit more? What do you mean by harm contracts?
Yeah, so repair harm contracts are an actual written representation of the agreement that you have with another person in your relationship. So if harm is caused, then you have a list of ways to repair it that the person who's repairing harm enjoys doing, and that the person that is having the harm repaired enjoys receiving.
The repair harm contract is something that two people agree upon, and it helps them figure out what they need in order to have healthy conflict and then repair from that conflict, or that we have maybe hurt each other's feelings, and there's been some harm caused, and then here's a path for repairing that. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, it's usually in response to like the trust that's broken, right? So if obviously, there's other things to consider naturally. There's a discussion about the conflict to resolve the conflict. You can have all that too, but then there needs to be this repair harm. I think to explain it better, maybe it replaces the I'm sorry. Right. So it's a demonstration that you still care about the relationship and you care about it going forward. And so these bonding activities are supposed to help.
Okay, so we just defined it. Now, who uses it? Who are the people that are using these contracts?
Well, I encourage every 2 people in a household to have a repair harm contract between them. I use it and always taught it to people who are going through a divorce, because it's so important that children of divorce understand that you can repair a relationship. And then especially for children of divorce from narcissistically abusive situations where that social bond is based on power exchanges instead of a social contract where we care and have compassion for each other and bond in emotionally intimate ways.
So we've defined it. Now we know who uses it, but why do they use it? What kinds of things are happening in these people's lives that they would need something like this?
Why? Well, I mean, I think overall in society, we're kind of losing sight of what our social contract is to each other, right? I had a friend when we were got an Uber to go out one night say, oh, we're getting an Uber so that we don't get a DUI. And I was like, what? But what I said was, no, we're getting an Uber so that we don't kill somebody, so nobody gets hurt, right? And we aren't thinking about each other enough. We're paying attention to what the consequences are and deciding whether or not we're okay with the consequences without taking into consideration the harm it does to the social bond that we have with the other person. Right. And so we're doing it to demonstrate, especially as parents with their children, to demonstrate that the social bond's important and you have agency over that. So that's why the things that are put on there they're not tasks of servitude, right? They're demonstrations of love that put into a relationship, like a back rub or making somebody's favorite meal, or getting a drawn picture from your child, or sitting down with them for 10 or 15 minutes, as much as you can stand if you were the one that needs to repair harm, and watch those stupid YouTube videos. It feels like you can hear the brain cells screaming as they're dying in your head while you're watching it, but as parents will do it to repair harm.
So that's why we're using these contracts. Like, can you give us, like the nuts and bolts of it? How does this work? What does it look like? How would it play out? Maybe, give us an example, and two, maybe steps for formulating such a thing.
Right. So I would say you would actually sit down and have a family meeting, or in lieu of that, have a family dinner and discuss how important the contract is, and talk about how it's important that we have compassion for each other, right? When I introduced it to my child, I said, so if your best friend stole $5 from you and returned the $5, would everything be okay? No, right? Because you don't trust the other person. So that's what the contract does. And so I'd sit and explain that to everybody, or even to your partner, why you think that it's important. And because you want to have it established before there's conflict. And then you discuss the things that would go on it. You make a list on each contract between two people. There's a list of things that person A would like to do, that person B would like to receive to repair harm, and vice versa for everybody. Then at the bottom, you kind of sign on. I like to have a signature at the bottom, but there are rules and stipulations for it. So the first one we already went over. They can't be servitude. It's not taking somebody's trash out, doing the trash out all week or doing all the dishes. So it can't be servitude. And number 2 is that once harm is repaired, you're never, ever going to bring it up again. You're free from that conflict going forward. And so you sit down and have this discussion, and people talk about what they like to do. People talk about what they like to receive. And then everybody comes up with a contract, and you put it into play after that night. What I particularly like about it is the opportunity for the parents to model repairing harm when they've repaired harm in their relationship with their child. Let's just say, we yelled, lost our patience and yelled. So I think it's particularly powerful if the first instance is when a parent repairs harm with a child, but don't create that situation just to make sure it happens.
So maybe a couple things that it's not, like what you mentioned a moment ago. It's not a punishment.
Right.
And it's also not transactional either. This isn't a tit for tat. This isn't, well, you did that, and so now I'm going to do this. That's what it is not.
Exactly. That is what it is not.
Instead, it is a well thought out avenue for people to feel better about what has happened and then repair the trust in the relationship.
Exactly. And I notice with children sometimes, and we don't do it on purpose, right? We're trying to teach our children, that's our job as parents, to train, teach, coach them, to be good, what we would consider good people, right? Healthy people. And in that process, sometimes we have a tendency to tell our child that they did something wrong and then put in place the natural consequence without realizing that they've walked away feeling like they're a jerk, that they just behaved like a jerk, and they weren't given the tools to protect or maintain or establish or repair their own relationship with other people. And that's what this gives them, the opportunity to have agency over their reputation and how they're viewed by other people. You have to follow through with it, and it's important to be consistent with it, and also to update it. It might be that some of the things aren't possible anymore, or they aren't enjoyable to you anymore for doing or receiving.
So in a sense, it's sort of like a living contract. It's a living document that we can make changes to over time when we think, you know what, that really doesn't work for me anymore. I've decided that I need to switch over to, this is what actually feels better to me now, and allowing people to develop in that sense.
Exactly.
Michelle, this is a really great idea. And we are talking about people that are perhaps on the other side of an abusive circumstance, where we're trying to formulate new healthy patterns in relationships, possibly for the first time ever. And one of the things that our clients don't deal well with is conflict. Is that true in your case as well? Do you find that your clients have a hard time with conflict long after the abuse is over?
It's absolutely true. And that's another reason that I really like this contract, is because, well, there's two reasons there. First of all, it helps them feel empowered in conflict, which can make conflict less scary. But it also gives them a script to follow, right? And so being able to follow a script is much easier, especially when it's prepared ahead of time, is much easier than trying to wing it by yourself, right? And it's forcing emotional intimacy. And people who have left narcissistically abusive situations had emotional intimacy used against them. And so there is this apprehension of engaging in emotional intimacy, especially after you've done something wrong. So it's a safe way established beforehand with the script of repairing harm after having done something wrong.
Something that's coming to mind for me right now is the neurobiology of conflict, and how that when you're in a conflict, and especially if you have a history of interpersonal trauma, conflict is scary, and it puts you in the part of your brain that's in the survival part of your brain. And we're not necessarily being as logical. We're being more reactive and emotional. Sounds to me like that these contracts require us to sit down, be in our logical, rational mind, think ahead, having forethought, planning ahead, right? And really examining it with the part of our brain, which is the logical, rational part. Most of us are used to navigating conflict in the moment and trying to repair in the moment. And that doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't work at all. And actually going to grab the contract would create that space where you can calm down and come out of fight, flight, or freeze. But for most of us, the contract is going to come after the conflict. So I really think, the conflict happens and everybody's sitting around feeling kind of shitty, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, we've got this contract. And you go get the contract and look it over. But also to talk about the neural pathways, what I like about what you're bringing up is that by planning ahead and creating the contract ahead of time, you've already laid the groundwork. You've already started to create that neural pathway to thinking about repairing harm. And I think this is a really good question that brings us into the more you do the repair harm, the more you use the repair harm contract. I wonder if it starts to change the way that we engage in conflict, right? If only feeling safer in it.
Yes, and feeling a sense of agency, feeling that maybe the conflict isn't going to result in the worst case scenario ever. We have more faith that we can resolve the conflict, that our relationships will survive the conflict. And that's all news to us. Early in recovery, it's like, wait, hold on, huh? You can have a fight and everything's okay? Are you sure about that? And we have to practice it. And it's like muscle memory that we have to relearn how to do something. So I think you're absolutely right that by using these scripts and these contracts, that it's kind of forcing the brain to head in a different direction, eventually could just become that new muscle memory.
Right. And when you think about it, the only way we grow, the only way that we get closer to other people in social interactions is through conflict. Conflict is where we are most vulnerable. Conflict is how we become emotionally intimate with others. And you can't have a healthy relationship without conflict, which is scary as hell for people coming out of narcissistically abusive relationships, because that conflict goes absolutely nowhere every time. And it results in somebody feeling worse because you are with somebody that can't be emotionally intimate.
This is excellent, Michelle. I know that the people watching this are going to get a lot out of it. Conflict is a source of stress, not just in the present If we're in the abusive relationship, it's a major source of stress. And you might even have this sense about yourself like, this doesn't seem right. I think we should be able to have this conversation. And for some reason, we just can't. You might even have like this part in your mind that says, this isn't normal. This isn't okay. How come I can actually talk through this with someone else, but I can't talk through it with this person? Now, fast forward, you're done with that. You're not doing that anymore. And you are in your new healthy life. You're going to have conflict. It's going to happen. And like Michelle said, that's what brings us closer. That's when we get to really talk about those vulnerable parts and say what we need. Ooh, it's scary to be healthy too, because we're doing a lot of things for the first time. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This is so helpful. Thanks for watching or listening. Goodbye.
Bye.